So on Facebook, I saw a very interesting Facebook post that was put out there. And it was basically made by someone that's coming from a sort of secular, agnostic, atheist kind of perspective. And essentially, what the person was saying was that, the reason why religion and God cannot be real, or that the reason why those things aren't true, is because no one is born knowing about God, right? Like God, or the concept of God, religion, what have you, is something that has to be taught to you, right? As a human being, like people teach it to you, like when you're a child or whatever. It's not something that you innately know. Like you're not born into this world already knowing about God and religion. It's something that's taught to you, and therefore that would basically mean that, I guess, God isn't real, or that God doesn't exist, or that religion's false, or whatever. That's more or less what the argument is. And of course, there's kind of a premise that's kind of snuck into that argument, which is the idea that that basically, if you don't know something when you're born, that therefore then it can't be true or something, or that if you need people to tell you about something in order for you to know about it, then therefore it's not really true. Which obviously it's kind of a weird argument. That's kind of a premise that's very questionable. Obviously, we know that that's not true. And I responded to that comment, or rather, I should say, I responded to that post, and I said, well, no one's born knowing calculus, epistemology, and English, but okay, right? And I was kind of being a little bit sarcastic, but, I do feel like the sarcasm is warranted because the argument is very poor. I mean, there's practically no critical thinking behind the argument itself. It's just something that atheists like to repeat, the more so the new atheists, right? Not even the more sophisticated intellectual ones, the ones that are more well-versed in philosophy and arguments and things like that. But that being said, there was a person that responded to that specific comment, and obviously I'm not going to mention the person's name. I don't think that would be appropriate to do. But, in a more or less snarky way, this person was basically saying that, oh, you're further proving my point because, if God was real, he would make it obvious and everyone know about him and all this stuff. And that's kind of a weird response because that actually is not originally what the argument was about. What the argument was originally saying was something to the effect of like, hey, if God was real, then you would be born knowing about God already, right? Like you're born into this world, and without anyone teaching you, you would automatically know that there is a God that exists, or that you would already know this religion just innately, without it being taught to you, right? That was originally what the argument was saying. And so apparently, what he was basically getting at, the person that responded to my comment, was that he's saying that if God really existed, or that if Christianity were true, or some other religion was true, then everyone would have the exact same religion, right? In other words, there would be no religious disagreement if God did really exist, right? However, again, that's also, again, a separate argument from the one that was originally made, right? So now we're kind of talking about a different argument, kind of moving the goalpost a little bit. But also, it's worth pointing out the fact that people disagree on a lot of different things. People disagree on morality and ethics and history and economics and all these other subjects. People have different beliefs on those things, but it doesn't mean that the belief about certain things are somehow false.